Hi, David. We have David Such here on Unleashing Light. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Liz. It's a pleasure to be back on the show.
Yeah, so David is back for a follow-up conversation. He is a near-death researcher, having spent time researching thousands of people that have had these experiences and has a lot of wisdom. So I'm happy to have you back.
It's good to be
So
back.
you. So we're diving into a different little topic here, maybe a little bit about just the emotions that we carry and the vibrations that are given off by us. Can you speak a little bit to just the different types of emotions and where that brings us in the world, depending on what state we're in vibrationally?
Well, certainly. So, all of our emotions, the whole range that we experience, and there are dozens of different emotions, they are all expressions of duality, either love or fear. And so, the the lowest vibration emotions are shame, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Anger is a little higher vibration than, of course, your highest emotions or your Zen consciousness, being aware of the connection of all living things, recognizing that when you're looking at a plant or an animal or a human being or even a rock, that's really another version of you, because we're all expressions of the one creative, benevolent source of all that is. And our emotions are a guide. So often people, we do this as human beings a lot. We will do things that we don't want to do. People are in relationships they don't want to be in, or jobs they don't want to be in, or things like that. And really, we need to move our society to a place where we never do things that we don't genuinely want to do from an emotional standpoint. But the way our society is structured, just to survive, for instance, I have to take on a job that I don't like too much. I do power plant consulting. I used to be a power plant engineer for 23 years, and I still do consulting because, doing work in spirituality, at least for me, unless you're one of the people that makes it to the top, you don't make much money doing it.
Yep.
So our emotions guide us, that gut instinct, that emotion. And a lot of times the negative emotions are frowned upon. And really, that's not the case. You get a lot of light workers or spiritual people who will try and push away all expressions of fear completely. And it's like, no, that's the growth process, is the fear love duality, dipping in the fear, springing back up into love even higher, dipping down a little more into fear, springing back into love even higher. It's a push pull energy. It's the way we propel consciousness forward. So, for instance, anger. If a person is depressed, that's a low vibrational state, very low vibrational state. It's a state of selfishness, and selfishness is a dirty word, but I don't mean it in a negative context. When one is not being treated compassionately, or is being mistreated by others, they have to be selfish and close themselves off. They have to only think of themselves if nobody else is. It's a protection mechanism. So if you're in a state of depression and you move to a state of anger, which is a higher vibrational energy than depression and hopelessness, think about what that does, what anger does. Anger makes you feel powerful, right? So in the animal kingdom, an animal might get angry and fight back to survive, or a human being might get angry and say, I'm going to do something about this. And a little example is, I bought this fixer-upper house, and the closet door, I would shut it, and sometimes it would stay shut and sometimes it would pop open. And I went a couple of years dealing with that. And one day it popped open and I shut it. And I was walking out of the room and it popped open again. I said, son of a, and I got angry and I dropped what I was doing and I fixed it. Or, a woman who's in an abusive relationship, it feels helpless, which is a lower vibration than anger. They get angry. And what do? I'm not taking this anymore. And they either leave or they stand up or they do something to change it. So even the lower vibrational emotions that are unpleasant have their place. When you experience disconnection, loneliness, well, how much more beautiful is that? How much more do you appreciate human connection or a friend or a partner?
Yeah.
I mean, I was not ready for marriage until much later in life.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I had to go through to be ready for marriage is to experience complete loneliness and feeling like no one cared. And then this ex-girlfriend I had, who was one of the few people in the world who really cared about me outside of my family, I started to recognize that. And, I married her, of course, and it turned out to be a wonderful relationship. I have one of those relationships that I used to hate, when I was a single guy, because I would try in relationships and nothing but failure. And you see these married couples, there's not a huge percentage of them, but there's some of these married couples where they never argue. They just are all lovey-dovey and they appreciate each other and respect each other. And they have these really good marriages. And you go, and why can't I have that? I thought I'd never have that. And I did. And I couldn't have had that if I hadn't gone through some of the terminology I've heard is the dark night of the soul.
So really, you feel like it does take the dark night of the soul to really have that beautiful, loving. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I actually have never thought about it that way. I didn't know that. I don't know. Help me understand that a little bit.
Sure. So I used to watch the show that's on YouTube, and I think you can still see them on there, and it's called I Shouldn't Be Alive. And it was about people who went river rafting, and and the raft went down and they got trapped somewhere, or lost in the mountains, or lost in the woods, or they go for a walk in the desert and they lose their way. And they're in these life or death survival situations. One guy was hiking down in the volcano, breathing in the toxic gases and all that. And there's something really interesting that I really liked about that show. They would go through these traumatic experiences, life or death survival. And some of them were out there 3, 5, 7 days in these life or death survival. And some of them were injured, a plane crash, and their bones are broken and they're, all torn up or burnt or whatever. And they're in a horrible physical condition. And it's very common at the end when the rescuers come, when the helicopter's coming or the rescuers are coming through the woods, nothing has changed with their circumstances. They're still all messed up. They haven't eaten. They haven't had anything to drink. They're still feeling just as physically miserable. None of their circumstances have changed. They just see the rescuers and they describe it as elation, the happiest moments of their life. The most joy I ever experienced. Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? And then afterwards, they say things like, it changed me. I appreciate life more. It healed some relationships. One guy went out, I think, river rafting with his dad, and they got trapped out there, and they both survived, and it healed their relationship. After that, they were friends. And I really believe, I think I mentioned it in the last show we did, that Proverbs says sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. And certainly we don't have to choose painful experiences. We can learn all our lessons slowly over a long period of time. But if you want to go through fast learning, the best way is a traumatic experience. And if you look at society and some of the very famous people that have become ultra successful, they had traumatic experiences. And often the trauma becomes their greatest strength. And even our mythological figures, Batman, he sees his parents get killed in front of him when he's a little boy. Get shot by a couple of thugs. And what does he do? He becomes a superhero for justice and protecting the innocent. And so often when we go through these experiences, we don't see how it positively affects us, but it does. And people come out of negative experiences with gratitude for what they have. There's movies about this. There's one called The Game, and it's this billionaire who loses everything. And then, of course, it turns out it was only a game and he's got it all back. Well, it humbled him and he appreciated what he had and he appreciated his family and friends when before he didn't. And so these experiences usually our most difficult experiences become our greatest strengths. And I even met one woman who was a counselor for women who were sexually abused as children. Yeah. And why was she such a good counselor? She herself went through that. Who better to counsel these people? Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't exist. Negative experiences would not exist in a perfect plan of creation if they didn't have their purpose. And the purpose is a sort of fast, intense growth experience.
And so what about, so kind of we're talking at like the bottom of the bowl here with like the uncomfortable feelings of like shame and helplessness and powerlessness. And so what I mean, what have you seen people having to do to kind of rise out of that as opposed to being stuck there? Like, for example, like somebody who's just been feeling shameful and helpless and deeply depressed that just kind of go on maybe to take their lives or spend, you know, the last 50 years of their lives and pass away that way. Like, what makes one person shift out of it versus being like stuck in it?
Well, you don't have to come out of your dark night of the soul. You can have an entire lifetime dark night of the soul. And some people do.
That's
And they have the greatest learning. So some people come out of it, and it generally involves a decision. You know, things get worse and worse and worse. The woman who's suffering from an abusive spouse, you know, the abuse gets worse and worse and worse till finally she says, I've had enough. And for me, I went through 3 years of just severe depression, just feeling really lonely and worthless. And one day when I was lying there in my bed, you know, I didn't even like getting out of bed in the morning. I wouldn't even shower some days. I'd go a couple of days without showering because I just didn't care about life anymore. I was just existing. And one day I said, well, I either have to get busy living or get busy dying. You know, I think I remembered that from the Shawshank Redemption. I
Mhm.
said, well, I've got to do something. I just can't keep doing this. And that's generally the way the universe will work, the same way a parent does, you know. They tell them once, tell the child once, you know, don't do that. You know, you're going to get hurt. And then they get more and more insistent. And if you have to let the child get hurt to learn their lesson, well, that's what happens. Eckhart Tolle said, life will give us whatever experience is necessary for the advancement of consciousness. And so, you know, that happens sometimes. And coming out of it, just it has to get bad enough so that we make a change. But sometimes, you know, maybe it's a physical disability, or maybe it's something where we can't change the circumstances. Well, we can't always control the circumstances in life, but we can control the way we react to them. So when I went through my 20 years of chronic pain, I was not good at it. I mean, I did this woe is me and got all depressed, and I'm 80% healed. Well, you know, I spent 3 years in a mobility scooter. I couldn't even go to the grocery store and be on my feet for 20 minutes because it would hurt my feet. And I had severe tendonitis throughout my body. And I miraculously healed from it. I don't know what caused the healing, but I, you know, was walking 5 miles 3 days a week, and I was on my feet, and my mobility scooter was collecting dust, and then I relapsed. I didn't go as bad as I was before, but I relapsed. And I used my mobility scooter a couple of times, and I started to get that depression again. I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. I'm not going there again. I remember what that was like. I'm just going to treat it like a nuisance and do my best to enjoy life. And of course, I recovered from it after about 6 months. But, you know, the way we react to things, you know, I used to be so persnickety. I can't think of another word about my car. You know, if I got one little scratch on it, I would get all upset. And one day I just realized, you know, you get a car and it's going to get little dings and scratches and dents and whatever. And I was at a friend's house down in Mexico, and this kid was walking by carrying this lumber, and he banged the mirror and put a big scratch in it, you know. And he looked at me with terror in his eyes, and I said, hey, it's just another one. Be more careful next time. It's cool. Go on. You know, it's not the end of the world. So we got to choose the way we respond to things. You know, somebody cuts me off on the road. Am I going to be pissed off? And, you know, that's not a pleasant emotion to feel. It's a better emotion for me to say, you know what? I've done that. I've been in that mode, whether I'm in a hurry or I'm just being aggressive or I'm just being a jerk. I've driven like that. I'm going to cut the guy some slack. You know, he's having a bad day. Well, that feels better for me. So you make the choice to react in a way that feels better. And some people, they could take a long time to learn that. I took a long time to learn that.
But you made it. And so I'm curious if it was just that simple that you were laying in bed one day going, I just need to choose different, or it was kind of like a build up to that, or was it just boom, one day you kind of said, I need something different?
Well, yeah, it was just so bad. And for so long, I just said, well, I got to do something. And the thing that I did was I lived in this tiny home that was unfinished. And, you know, I just had no motivation. You know, I just felt lazy, lethargic. When you're depressed, you don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like talking to people. I just said, well, I've got to do something. So I set my mind on finishing my home, and I finished it up. And, you know, when we have a task and we do it, you know, even if it's something like cutting the lawn or cleaning the bathroom, you know, something that would be considered unpleasant, afterwards, it produces a dopamine response, and it releases dopamine and serotonin. You get this satisfaction.
Yeah, like
And there's a reason for that. It's built into our biology to build, to create, to improve, and we get a little feel good feeling from that.
yeah, just
And
even a
so,
small accomplishment can kind of go a long way for people. So
yes.
maybe, on that note, you could speak to maybe the power of our thoughts and our words and how that kind of maybe does influence some of the other emotions to kind of shift into place for us.
Okay. Yes. The power of thoughts and words, very important.
Mm,
Now, in the afterlife, thoughts are things. That's one of the spiritual laws. So they create this thing called quantum fields. And within that field, anything the mind can imagine or create or conjure up becomes instantly manifested. Well, down here on Earth, it works the same way, but it's a very slow, long, drawn out process, and it usually requires a physical action to do it.
mm,
And so, one of the things I started hearing when I started doing my research on near death experiences is people would come back and they would say, well, I had no idea how powerful my thoughts and words are. If I would have known, I would have chosen them better. And because we are little facets of the creator, we're little facets of the big creator, we are creator gods, and our thoughts and words do have power. So I'll hear people like Candace Owens, she's a congresswoman. She says quite a bit. She'll say, I am just sick and tired. Well, don't say that. You say that enough, especially if you're a good manifester. If you're not that great of a manifester, you can get away with it.
mhm.
But they will say things like that. It's like, don't say that. And I was taught by my guides, if I woke up in the morning in a bad mood, to just smile and say, thank you, Father, for another day. And this is going to be a great day. And if you repeat something long enough, and especially if you feel the emotion of it, it changes the reality. So what we focus on, we really do get more of. We have this idea that it's this reward system, right? Like God is a cosmic Santa Claus. If I've been good, I'm going to get presents, and if I'm bad, I'm going to get a lump of coal in my stocking. And no, that's not the way it is. The universe says, well, what do you want? What are you going to think about? What are you going to say? That's what we're going to give you more of. So if you wake up and you say, another miserable day in my miserable life, well, guess what? That's the way it's going to be. And if you say to yourself something long enough, like, I'm not going to worry about that right now. I mean, I used to have a lot of worries about money. And so I would just say out loud every time I worried, you know what? I'm fine for today. I got all the food I need today. I got food, water, I got a clothing, place to live. I'm fine for today. So I'm not going to worry about it today. Maybe I'll worry about it tomorrow. And once I started saying that enough, I finally stopped worrying about it.
Yeah, and so I've had people we've had that conversation and they try it, but then they'll do it for like a week and then give up, right? Well, it doesn't work, so I'm just going to go back to my negative thoughts or self put downs. And so what do you say to somebody that's like, I tried it and it didn't work. I tried to think positive and say nice things and nothing in my life changed.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just mentioned that here on Earth, it's a slow, long, drawn out process, right? So if I'm uh, 25 pounds overweight, which I am, I can't say, well, I'm going to diet and exercise for a week and I'd better be thin and healthy or else I'm giving up. You got to stick with it. Same with meditation. If you meditate once or twice a month or exercise once or twice a month or eat healthy once or twice a month, it's going to have an effect. But really, if you want to make a transformational change in your life, if I want to make a transformational change in my life, it takes dedication and consistency. Just like getting healthy, you got to exercise, you got to eat right. It takes dedication and consistency and patience. And a lot of times down here, we're not patient. We live in a society where it's instant coffee, drive-through food, on-demand movies. We want everything right now. It goes back to the old joke of the man who's very impatient. And so he prays to God and he says, God, please help me. I'm very impatient. I need patience, but I need it right now. That's not the way it works.
Okay. So consistency and just allowing life to unfold and not giving up so quickly, right?
Right. And patience, because a lot of times, okay, this is just another example. When my wife and I were just boyfriend and girlfriend, she knew that this is the man for me. This is the man I'm going to be married to.
Mhm.
Well, she was ready. I wasn't. So we broke up. And it was 3 years later when we finally got back together because I had to be ready. So sometimes, you're trying for that perfect job or whatever, and just the timing isn't right.
Mhm.
And my healing happened, I believe, because I changed my attitude. When I left the big city and moved to a mountain, top of a mountain in the middle of the woods, nature's got a very healing energy. And I think that was part of it. But I think another big part is I started saying and believing, because I was saying it so much and thinking it so much. I couldn't fool myself, like wake up one morning and I'm in pain and say, I have no pain, I'm fine. No, that's your brain and your consciousness knows that's a lie. So what I would do is I kind of tricked myself and I would say, I know that every day I'm feeling a little better. Every day I'm healing a little more. And of course I did. And it happened over about a 6-month period. And then I was walking again. And boy, when I had that joy, then I really grabbed onto it. So it takes a lot of patience, because sometimes the thing that we want, the other players involved aren't ready yet. Maybe the perfect job isn't ready. And like when I was looking for a house, I looked for a house for a year. Like what I wanted. I wanted this house in the middle of the woods, no more than 10 miles away from a small city. Well, that was hard to find on my budget. If I had $1 million, it's easy to find. But I was on a tight budget and I got very dejected. And my last day, I said, all right, I'm giving up. I'm going back to California. I'm going to park my trailer at my dad's house and live there for a while. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And I thought, I'll check the real estate listings one last time. And the house that I'm in now that I bought had come up that day. The person, the place I was going to live that was perfect for me, the owners weren't ready to sell it yet. And I wasn't being patient. And so patience is a big virtue and a big step in trusting the process of creation and trusting our own paths.
I love that. Yeah, I think something that is really hard for a lot of people is to trust the process, to trust that the universe is working for you, because we
Mm.
have one terrible or a number of terrible things happen in a small period of time, and it's like, how can I trust this, and what do you say in those moments of going, well, I'm trying but bad things just keep happening? It's like one thing after the another and I can't catch a break. And what do you say
Well,
with challenged with the trust?
okay, so if you're going through that, and I've had that, I've had years where I think, oh God, nothing I'm trying works. The other day I was trying to get some things done and I was mowing the lawn on my $3,000 riding mower and it just stopped and died. And then I tried to go on and get a parking permit for the place I'm going to be parked, and they changed the system and I couldn't get through. And I got really frustrated, Well, when that happens, I got to kind of take a break and relax, um, change my attitude, put it in perspective. Things are going to go wrong no matter what we do and how perfect we are down here. Mistakes are going to get made. Bad things are going to are going to happen. And sometimes when a bad thing happens, or we're not getting what we want, or things aren't going our way, and it can be that way for years, we just got to do our best to get through it. So the way heaven wants us to deal with difficult times or suffering, and this is something I'm still learning because I was terrible at it before and I'm slowly getting better at it, is we're supposed to endure it with a humble dignity, and we're supposed to find joy if possible. So like, I'll give you an example. I was leaving my friend's house and I had a bunch of stuff in my hands, including my laptop, and it was raining outside. And I didn't want my laptop to get wet as I was loading the stuff in my car. And so I put it on the wheel well under, on top of the wheel, under the wheel well of my SUV. As I loaded the rest of the stuff, my friend came out and talked to me for 45 minutes, and I forgot the laptop was there. And so I drove off and I heard a crunch, and I immediately remembered, oh my goodness, I left my laptop there. And I was about ready to get angry with myself. How could you be so stupid? And I didn't have a lot of money then. I couldn't afford a new laptop. And I thought, well, I can't get through it. I need my laptop to work. So I guess I'm getting a new laptop. I'm going to smile about that, find things to be happy about, try and find a moment of joy if you can. But sometimes you got to go through the dark night of the soul, and it's going to be miserable. Even with the best of attitude, it's going to be tough. My stepdad said something to me once that that really helps me sometimes, to not get too overly upset about the bad things that happen in life. I can't remember what the incident was, but I was really upset about something that there was nothing I could do about it, And he just looked at me and said, sometimes life is a big S sandwich and we all got to take a bite. That's true down here.
It's true. Some of us are eating a whole sandwich in one day, but yes.
Yeah, we're going to have our good times and bad times, and we'll do our best to get through the bad times and enjoy the good times.
All right. So we've kind of discussed the really tough ones that hold us down in terms of emotion. And we were talking about anger having a little more energy, and the fight for survival being more so like an outward expression, where the depression is like more of an inward type of expression. So I'm just wondering how the anger manifests both within our own bodies, and then how it really impacts the people around us. Because and I could be wrong, but I don't think the depression really has as much of an impact on people around us as maybe the anger or the rage. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that are.
Well, that's because of the way it's dealt with. So some people who are in a state of anger or rage will take it out on others, and so it's more visible. But depression or hopelessness does more harm to the people around than anger does, believe it or not. It's a lower vibration. So on my website, godtookmyclothes.com, if you click on the spiritual counseling link, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a range of emotions. It shows about 20 or 25 different emotions and ranks them. And so you may not see the outward expressions or the effect of depression, but we're all connected. So the New Age spiritualists call this energetic connection the crystalline grid. Well, that's just a metaphor. It's not made of crystal, and it's not a grid, but there is an energy network that connects all of humanity. And when one is suffering terribly, that affects the rest of humanity. When a person is in a state of joy and unconditional love, that affects the rest of humanity. And that's why you'll hear things from near-death experiencers like, one person living in unconditional love is more powerful than millions living in fear. One act of kindness is felt by millions because we're all connected. So probably the best thing for us to do when we're in these negative states is to be mindful, especially ones like anger, where it can be taken out on others, is to do our best not to take it out on others. So if I have to do something that I dread, like, calling customer service for my cell phone, and I'm going to speak to a person in a foreign country who can't understand me, and I think I might get angry, I let the person, and I think I might not be able to control my anger, I'll let the person know first thing. I say, listen, I might get really upset, but it's not at you. It's at the situation. So if I get upset, please don't take it personally, and please forgive me. And I've said that. And so, we have to deal with it the best way we can when we're going through difficult stuff. We have to be mindful not to drag other people down with us. Depressed people tend to want to make others depressed, or angry people tend to want to make other people angry, because misery likes company. And when we connect with each other, if a vibration is mismatched, it's either, and two people are communicating or interacting, they're either going to match their vibration. So, if one person's up here and one person's down here, this person up here, these are going to cause this person's vibration to raise, or this one's going to get dragged down. And if they stay separate, they're going to go away. They're going to separate. They're not going to communicate. And so what happens if somebody's angry at you and you're laughing? They don't like that.
That's true. So I'm wondering how that works in like a really unhealthy or abusive relationship, where one person is feeling very depressed and powerless, and the other person's feeling very rageful and having a lot of power over them. Is the person that's feeling very depressed, help them to pull up to anger so that they can fight and get out of it? Um, can you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, sure. It can do that. So anger is an energy that motivates us to change if we respond to it properly. And in those kind of relationships, there really isn't a victim. And not from a spiritual perspective, certainly from an earthly perspective, there's victims, this person's doing these horrible things to me. Well, that situation will get worse and worse and worse until the person is motivated to do something about it. So it's like my mom had this car that I gave her, and she didn't take really good care of it. And it started making a noise, and it was getting louder. And she was telling me this on the phone. And she'd get upset if I said, well, you need to take that to a mechanic. So I had to go a roundabout way. I said, well, how did you feel about that? How do you feel about that? And she says, oh, it doesn't bother me. I just turn the radio up. Well, it's going to get worse until she's forced to do something about it. So that happens in life. And the way it works with our spiritual guides and our higher selves and so forth is if we don't learn a lesson, they'll ramp it up and make it worse and worse and worse until we are motivated to make the change.
And does,
I was,
oh,
go on.
does this work with people who are like sociopaths and psychopaths, or is that just kind of, and I know that's a label and I don't mean to put that on people, but like people that really have true difficulty, whether it's a brain issue or whatever, experiencing emotion, how does that play into it?
Well, I don't really understand the psychology of psychopaths and narcissists and so forth. I suspect that comes from a long-term lack of compassion when they're younger. It's unusual, maybe extremely rare or unheard of, for a child born into a happy, healthy, balanced, loving household, very functional, healthy household, to grow up and become a psychopath. So something's going on there. But the laws of spirituality apply to everybody. These laws apply to everybody. Now, what can be done to reach those people? I don't know. Or
Yeah.
can they be healed or cured? I don't know. Maybe they had a life plan to come down here and experience that. And so it's not going to change.
Okay.
Could be. I don't know enough about that to address it intelligently.
Yeah, so I'm just because, when I think about, okay, well, obviously we're born with like this love and it's our birthright to feel love, give love, experience love. And then I think about people that are born into these families that are not loving, that are toxic, and learn a false sense of love where that they have to perform or be a certain way in order to feel loved, and then the love that they think they're giving out really isn't love in its truest form. How do we help, or what happens to somebody who thinks they're loving but it's really kind of entangled with a lot of trauma or poor boundaries or just other stuff. Like in their mind, I'm being loving, but on the receiving end of somebody else, they're like, "Ooh, this does not feel good."
Well, we have to respond to those people with the utmost compassion and patience. That's a tough one for me. I'll give you a good example. A friend of mine, she called me, and she was investing in a third house. And this was her only investment, was real estate out in California. And her brother and her got in a really bad argument. And he was telling her, no, you shouldn't be investing in your home. There's these other investments that are better. And they got in a really bad argument. And that is an example of something very common in our society. And you just were addressing it. Love expressed in an inappropriate way. So why is that brother giving her sister a hard time? Is he going out to random strangers in the street who are buying real estate and telling them what a horrible investment it is? No, he's telling his sister. Why? Because his judgment is, this is not going to result in the best investment. This is not the best thing for my sister. There's this other thing that she's going to be happier and more satisfied with, and it's going to be more profitable. And she's not listening. And I'm angry because I love her. I want her to have a good life. And I'm trying to show her the path. And she's not listening. And so often we do that in our lives, love expressed in an inappropriate way. And there's tons of examples of it. And love expressed in a healthy way is very different. So religion, that's a very good example. People evangelize. And why are they doing that? Because they want to save as many of their fellow human beings as possible. And if this person thinks my religion's the only correct one, and if I don't tell people about it, they're going to get burned in hell forever. They're going to miss out on this paradise. And I want as many people to come with me as possible. So they're going to try and convince you of their religion. And the many people don't want to be preached at and be told what to believe in terms of their spiritual or religious beliefs. It can make them angry. Well, that's another example of love expressed in an inappropriate way. And the truth is that true unconditional love does not challenge another person's beliefs. If I come across a religious person who's a Christian or a Muslim or a Buddhist or whatever, I'm not going to tell them, oh, your religion got all these things wrong. You need to get on board with my spiritual belief systems. No, I'm not going to throw a wrench in their works. They're happy. And that tool is working for them if they're living a love-based life. The Sufis, that's a sect of Islam where they're very peaceful and they believe in nonviolence and accepting of others and so forth. The Buddhists are generally peaceful. Christians are generally love-based. I'm not going to throw a wrench in their work. So I'm not going to tell them, hey, you're following a recipe and your recipe's flawed. Well, it works for them. So, yeah.
Right. And if they're in a loving state, then why should we disrupt that?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's religion's a tool. And, a person who's dealing with that love expressed in an inappropriate way, if they can recognize that, it changes the way they perceive. So my friend who was investing in real estate, I said, recognize that your brother is arguing with you about this because he loves you and he wants the best for you. If he didn't care about you, he wouldn't care. Oh, I hope she loses money. I don't care about her. Right. And so once she recognized that, she responded differently. And she would just say things like, well, thank you. I appreciate your concern and I will consider what you've said. Don't lie, but be honest. And he might get mad, well, okay, well, maybe I made a mistake, but I appreciate you trying to help me avoid that. And that's a tough one for me as well, to recognize love expressed in an appropriate way. I'm learning slowly. We're slow learners down here on Earth.
It's a journey, right?
Yes, definitely.
To tag on to that, where we might in a family dynamic have someone who is very loving in an appropriate way and kind and peaceful and is trying to still love the family member that's angry or inappropriate. Is there a fine line between, or what is the fine line between loving them and enabling them?
Well, look at what the masters of the planet have done. They don't try and really use hardcore manipulation techniques to get another person to change. It is my personal belief that sometimes you have to allow people to make bad decisions and learn from them. There was this interview that I saw back in the 1980s when, there was a big economic boom in Japan, and you were getting these very wealthy Japanese businessmen. And this reporter was interviewing this Japanese businessman who was very successful, made a lot of money. And he says, well, how did you make so much money? He says, well, just experience. I mean, I know how to do it. He says, well, how did you gain experience? And what is experience? And he says, well, it's knowing how to make good decisions. And the reporter says, well, how did you learn how to make good decisions? And he says, by making a lot of really horrible, bad decisions, and we learn from our mistakes. And what kind of child are you going to have? They grow up and the parent never allows them to fail.
Like enabling.
I'm not sure that's the best thing.
Yeah, because it just is rewarding the bad behavior.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so enabling, you don't want to enable people, but often just letting them be, as long as they're not going to be permanently harming themselves or others. Often that is the best for an adult, not for a child. For the child needs guidance, but adults, they need to be able to make their own bad decisions. That doesn't mean if my spouse is an alcoholic and she's half passed out on the couch and she says, go get me some more vodka. Well, I'm not doing it, but I'm not going to tell her not to drink. Maybe
And
I
maybe,
might say, go get help or we're getting divorced or something like that. You don't have to enable the person, but you got to let them make their bad decisions.
and maybe part of that is when you were talking a little bit about isolation or letting yourself be, is that maybe that is a way to love them, is to just allow them to be in isolation so they can be with their choices and have the, clear moment of, I got to do something different. Kind of like when you were laying in bed going, I'm done with this, I'm done with the choice. So all right, well, let's shift to some of the more joyful, happy emotions. So I know those ones are kind of the bottom of the barrel, but what do you see kind of coming up after that? Is there something that comes before happiness? Is it, I don't know, content, or what are some of, I know there's joy, and before we get to the bliss and all these other things, what do you see in the middle as some emotions that cause an uplifting vibration?
Emotions that cause an uplifting vibration, certainly gratitude. So gratitude is a magnet for abundance of the thing that we're grateful for. Very powerful energy. So my prayers do not consist of asking the old man sitting in a chair in the sky and giving a list of things I need. God already knows what we need. I don't have to tell him. My prayer consists of gratitude. Sometimes I'm expressing gratitude for things I don't even have yet. Thank you, Father, for the financial abundance that's coming. Thank you for this beautiful day that I'm going to have. So gratitude is a very powerful energy. And of course, the emotion that is the biggest sign of spiritual maturity is joy. That's a very powerful emotion. Now, we on earth are experts in the emotion of compassion. Compassion is the highest vibrational expression of love that there is. And that's what we're working on here on planet Earth, is compassion. And so, if I'm feeling neutral or I'm feeling a little down, do something where it involves compassion, whether I'm doing some volunteer work or even something as simple as picking up a few pieces of trash when I'm pumping gas at the gas station. I'll do that sometimes. Helping somebody who's going through a hard time, just being there for him, listening, not trying to fix them or give them advice, just listening. I understand. I'm here for you. I'm right here with you. You're not alone. So there's a whole range of emotions. I wish I had them memorized, but they are on my website. And really, we go through various stages of these emotions in life. It's, if a human being on earth is in a state of joyful bliss their entire life, and they rarely face any challenges, you know what? They're kind of done with the learning process, and they're probably here helping us. They're the parent now. And so that's not what we're doing. Most of us down here are going through those ranges of emotions to learn and grow and help with the creation process. And it's a necessary part of it.
So how would you define the difference between empathy and compassion? Or are they essentially the same?
I would say they're similar. I don't know how to describe the difference between those two. I have a feeling of the difference, but I don't know how to verbalize it.
Yeah,
Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I'm sitting here going, I feel like when I am being compassionate to people, it is a sense of empathy, and in my head, I was kind of going, oh, what emotions does he have listed on his website? And is that one of them? So I was kind of thinking a bunch of thoughts at the same time, but I don't know.
Okay.
I kind of think of empathy as my ability to put myself in somebody else's shoes, and maybe compassion is being able to express a sense of love even without being necessarily in somebody else's shoes that I actually can't put myself in. Like, there's some experiences people will have that I will have no idea what that is
Hmm.
like to be in their shoes. I guess that's what comes to mind to me, but did something come up for you?
Yeah. I don't know if it was my own brain or my guides, but just kind of what you said. So empathy is understanding their position, understanding what they're going through,
Mhm.
and then compassion would be the action of doing something where there's nothing in it for you, but you're doing it to help a fellow human being. And so you can have compassion, I think, maybe without having empathy. You can say, well, I don't understand why they're all upset, but I'm going to do something to make them feel better.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a good way of describing it.
I like that. And then how would you define love?
Oh, love is a measurable quantum multidimensional energy. It
Mm,
is what all of creation is made of. It is what the creator is made of. The Bible got that right. God is love.
mm,
Um, it is an expression of all that is between the subatomic particles in an atom is the love of creation. Inside every human being, even the worst, Hitlers and the psychopaths and the people who seemingly in their earthly forms have no emotion, at the core of who they are is the love of God. It's in all things. It's the glue of the universe. It's the energy that expresses itself. It's the one and the all together.
mm.
Hard to describe, hard to understand from our human perspective, the soup of creation.
Yeah. And I'm
But
wondering,
love is all there is.
yeah, from all these NDE experiences that you get to hear about, is there any information that they give you about when we'll be able to rise as humanity and feel like where you said, well, if you're doing that, then you kind of they don't really have to do anything else here. Like, I mean, when do you see us being in a place where we can really rise the vibration to a point where it is mostly love and the fear is dampering down? Like, what needs to happen here for that to shift?
Time, we're getting really, really, really close. So there was an old paradigm.
Mhm.
We're still acting in survival mode. Survival mode is when I have to growl and snarl and take from others and or not think about others and only act in my own best interest, regardless how it affects others, to survive and have all the things I need and want for my own well-being. That's survival mode. And that was normal and necessary and appropriate 1,000 years ago. You would attach yourself to a group, whether it was an extended family or an army or something as big as the Roman Empire, and you made yourself as strong and powerful as possible. And then you took from others by force and enslaved them or took their things or whatever you wanted. That's what you, and if you didn't do that, it was like something's wrong with you. Why wouldn't you? It's either you or them. You really want it to be them. That was the norm. Well, roundabout, I'm going to say 1950s, the paradigm changed, but we're still in survival mode. So with our technology, with our amazing communication, even this conversation we're having, the technology, with our ability to mass manufacture, with our amazing cooperation skills as a species, we're not real good at it, but even what we've mastered has been wonderful. Yeah. Millions of people had to cooperate to make these things that we carry around. They're so convenient. Millions. With all that, there's a new paradigm that we just haven't realized. We're still in the cutthroat competition mode. And the new paradigm is this: there is enough for everyone. I mean, if we really cooperated, if we really worked with each other, and I'll just give a little example. Samsung and Apple, instead of suing each other, what if they said, we're still going to make our own products, but we're going to share everything, including employees. You want to borrow this employee to integrate our technology? And sure, borrow, man. We want your guy to put that technology you have in our phones. If we all cooperated worldwide, and we will get there, we'd have about a 10-hour work week. The United States spends half of our money on military. My goodness. with 10% of the military budget, just 10%, you divide that up among how many homeless people there are, that's $20,000 per homeless people per year. There's 10, 15 million empty homes, and there's 3.5 million homeless people. We are not cooperating. And that's a problem. And so this new world of love is coming. It's going to be about 50 years before there's peace on earth, and another 150 or so before this new world of love is here. It's going to be a world where we all cooperate. There will be no war. There will be no military. There will be no fighting. Well, we'll still have our disagreements, but we're going to be like a healthy family. You know, the brothers and sisters may have their arguments and disagreements, and they may even get mad at each other and not talk to each other for a while, but they're not going to pick up guns and knives and start killing each other.
Yeah.
And that's the world we're headed towards. And we're going to cooperate, and we're going to clean up the earth, and we're going to share and help each other. I mean, there's solutions for almost all the major problems out there, and it just takes cooperation. But we have things like, you know, car companies making vehicles more and more difficult to work on intentionally, you know, products that are made to be disposable. And we're doing things, especially corporate greed, that are just setting us back.
Yeah.
And we got to stop doing that. We got to learn how to cooperate. It's going to take a while, but we'll get there. We just need to be patient. No child goes from being 2 years old to being 20 and just says, oh, I'm skipping my childhood into all my teenage years and just going to be a mature adult. It takes time. It's going to take time for humanity to grow up. And we're still like the 2-year-olds, just starting to learn not to fight each other in the sandbox.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a long time.
To get to the cooperation, we first have to have the compassion so that we can have a sense of love for these people who are being greedy for whatever reasons or are still angry. And so, do you have any ideas on or what we could be doing different in the world to be teaching compassion more?
Well, there are certainly some teachers like you or me or other people that are teachers, but for most of us, for the vast majority of us, it's not going to be a doctrine or a religion or electing the right leader that's going to fix things. So the way the change is going to happen is individuals acting compassionately on their own. And there is something called the ripple effect that I hear from these near-death experiencers. I do something nice for somebody and it makes their day more pleasant. And now they're in a better mood and they treat all the people around them better. The world is not going to change by the right leader coming along or passing, you know, enough laws to make this a utopian society. I mean, in the United States, we have over 200,000 pages of federal law. You know, we tried to create a utopia. Now it's just worse and more complex and the whole system's broken and everybody knows it. It's going to come about by people making decisions on their own. You know, the environment, for instance, that's not going to clean up by some leader who's going to pass a law or, you know, demand that everybody do this. It's going to happen more by individuals saying, well, I'm making good choices. Yeah. Off-grid living has been growing by 30% a year for several decades.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that's making a huge change. People recycling.
Yeah.
You know? 50 years ago when I was a kid, if you said, well, where's the recycling bin? People were looking like, recycling bin? What are you talking about? This is not a scrap yard. And now they're everywhere.
Yeah,
Right?
I remember that being a new thing in elementary school where they like showed up with the bins and we're like, oh, cool. Yeah, I remember when it was fresh off the press. So that's interesting. And so I know in the beginning you were kind of said you use the polarity of, you know, fear versus love, and not love versus hate. And so I understand certainly between love and fear. But I think people see the opposite as love and hate. So can you describe why you're using fear as the opposite of love?
Well, fear is the opposite of love. It's just the duality of our planet. So hatred is an expression of fear. I mean, it comes from fear.
Mhm.
Yeah, I wish I could talk more about that, but I just don't have enough to say about that.
Well,
I know it's a love-fear duality. When we are disconnected from source, from the creative benevolent source, if we experience a disconnection, that creates fear.
Yeah.
And fear is, in my opinion, generated by that lack of connection.
Mm.
And if fear is let loose, it creates a hellish environment.
Yeah, no, I think, hatred, your answer of hatred being an expression of fear, I think is very accurate, right? Like if we weren't fearful of people of a different race or culture or gender or sexuality, if we weren't afraid of them, we wouldn't hate them, you know? And in many different categories too, if we didn't fear somebody having more money than us or fear somebody having more whatever than we do, there wasn't that comparison, I think there'd be less hate. So
Yeah, I think anger too, or hatred, at least when I think about it in my own life, there's a person that really betrayed me in my own perspective. This person really betrayed me, the worst betrayal I suffered in my lifetime. And I hate that person, hated for a long time. And I am still like working through that, getting rid of that hate. And what is that hate? It is, you damaged me. Well, and now I feel crappy because of what you did. And the reality is, when I look at my life, I needed that person and many others to betray me. I needed to experience betrayal because I deal with that in my counseling. If I had not experienced it, I would not be able to relate to my clients and help them. So that's why I experienced it. But there are other reasons why one experiences betrayal, because when you experience betrayal, it's the opposite of cooperation, somebody always having your back, loyalty, and you appreciate loyalty more. And of course, because I experienced betrayal, in my mind, what did I do? I said, well, I'm going to make sure I do my best never to betray another person. I don't want to have somebody else suffer like I did. And so it does change us for the better. Every negative expression of fear has its purpose in propelling us towards the light, towards a higher consciousness, towards a higher vibration of love and compassion.
what would you say you learned the most from a sense of betrayal? Like, what did it teach you that has benefited you? I mean, I know you can now speak to it to others, but personally, do you know what the biggest lesson was for you?
What the biggest lesson of that was, well, I think the biggest lesson for me was recognizing my true friends. I was not very good at choosing friendships, and I was in friendships where people were basically using me. And I stayed in those friendships and knowingly was being mistreated and used basically for their own benefit because I wanted that human connection. And I didn't value and appreciate the connections that were sort of weak with my own family and the people that really cared about me. So I have way less friends now than I had before, but the quality of those friends is so much better. I mean, the difference between now and my life 10 years ago is night and day. It's like going from being, a poor man living in the streets to being in a mansion. And when I recognized the importance of the people who really cared about me, it healed my relationship with my family, with my father, who I was always butting heads with. And now he's the best friend I have in the whole world. My sister, who I didn't always get along with. And now I really love and respect and appreciate her. We still have our differences of opinions and our differences in philosophies and so forth. But that experience of betrayal has made me appreciate and have gratitude for the people that have really been loyal to me in my life. And it has taught me the importance of loyalty to others. In this world of duplicity and corruption, is there anything stronger or more important than loyalty? It's a big one. It's really important,
Would it
having
be
somebody there for you through the worst of times.
say that it kind of did shift you towards people that were of a higher vibration once you could see people who were more on the level of just betraying others? So was able to thrust you forward also that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. It taught me a hard lesson. And it was such a hard lesson because it had happened a dozen times and I wasn't paying attention. And each betrayal got worse and worse and worse. And the final one, it's like, okay, now I get it. I should have gotten it the first time. And I'm a little slug brained and thick skulled. And I'm stubborn, which the negative quality of stubbornness is it's hard to get a person to change. So my guides have told me they get not frustrated, but it's difficult to get me to change direction. But the positive aspect of stubbornness is once I'm going in the right direction, I'm not giving up. I'm going in that direction and I'm going towards my goal. So even stubbornness has its negative side and positive side to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, too much of anything, right? Even the good, sometimes, you don't want to be you know, a welcome mat for people to just back over you. There has to be some of that, I don't know what I would call it, but just deep knowing of your own truth and being grounded. And so, yeah, absolutely. Well, so I know you have lots of information and experiences, and I want to make sure people can find you. It sounds like you're a certified spiritual coach and you offer those services. So where might they be able to contact you, David?
You can find my email at godtookmyclothes.com. And there's a link to my spiritual counseling. I don't do counseling for depression, mental illness, that kind of thing. It's just spiritual counseling. And there's also at that website a download to the first couple of chapters of my book. If you're interested, my book's called God Took My Clothes, same name as the website. And you can read that. And the entire version is in Spanish is there. Apparently it's not considered the same book. And my Spanish version isn't published. So the publisher doesn't have the rights. So I'm still giving away for free for now. So, and of course, I have a program for people who have financial hardship. I have a discounted spiritual counseling program for them. And if somebody doesn't want to spend any money and they just have questions at the time of this recording, I am still responding to all emails, not quickly. I can take a week or two to answer, but it's not a typed message. I can't do that anymore. So what I do is I respond with a voice clip so they can send me their questions and I'll do my best to answer.
And I will put those things in the description below, and hopefully they find you and reach out to you. So thank you so much, David, for being here with me today, and hopefully we'll have more to talk about in the future.
It was a pleasure talking with you today, Liz. Thank you.
Thank you.